Hey, welcome back to another episode of Genuine Questions. And in light, I guess, of him maybe getting arrested today, maybe tomorrow, maybe running for president, I'm not sure, but in honor of all of that going on in the news, this video is going to be dedicated to Donald Trump, and I'm just going to talk about some of my thoughts and opinions about him and how they've evolved over the years. So I actually did not like Donald Trump at first, really at first. Like, I never really cared about him back when he was on The Apprentice. I didn't watch it. Don't. If I had an opinion about him back before he got into politics, I do not remember what it was. I actually registered as a Republican in the 2016 primary so I could vote for John Kasich over Donald Trump because I was an idiot and obviously didn't know anything about anything at the time. And one of the reasons that I was skeptical of Trump back then is because I thought that maybe he was like a friend of the Clintons that was running as a disruptor for the Republican primaries. Just go and drown out any serious candidate, so then you become the nominee and it's a cakewalk for Hillary in the general election. That was sort of what I thought the plot was, and that was backed up by these emails that were released in the WikiLeaks dump where the Democratic Party is discussing their Pied Piper strategy. It says, "Our hope is that the goal of a potential Hillary Rodham Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party will be one and the same, to make whomever the Republicans nominate unpalatable to the majority of the electorate, and they have outlined 3 strategies to obtain their goal. 1 is force all Republican candidates to lock themselves into extreme conservative positions that will hurt them in a general election. 2, undermine any credibility or trust Republican presidential candidates have to make inroads in our coalition or independence. And 3, muddy the waters on any potential attack lodged against Hillary Clinton." And then they have a list of the Pied Piper candidates. Says there are 2 ways to approach the strategies mentioned above. The first is to use the field as a whole to inflict damage on itself, similar to what happened to Mitt Romney in 2012. The variety of candidates is a positive here, and many of the lesser known can serve as a cudgel to move the more established candidates further to the right. In this scenario, we don't want to marginalize the more extreme candidates, but make them more Pied Piper candidates who actually represent the mainstream of the Republican Party. Pied Piper candidates include, but aren't limiting to, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, and Ben Carson. We need to be elevating the Pied Piper candidates so that they are leaders of the pact and tell the press to take them seriously. I think it's concerning that the Democratic Party can tell the press who they are supposed to be taking seriously as candidates, but if you are upset that Donald Trump has taken over the Republican Party or the damage that you feel that he has caused, you really have nobody to thank except for Hillary Clinton and the DNC, because they were the ones that were elevating him as a candidate and forcing the media to take him seriously and shining that spotlight on him. So Hillary sort of created her own problems with that one. But I was concerned that not just, that it wasn't even a Pied Piper, like, oh, hey, let's focus on him because he is so ridiculous and, as they thought at the time, easy to beat, that he's the one we want to run against. But I thought that maybe it even went level deeper than that, where Trump might have been a willing participant in that because of his history and friendship with the Clintons. One of the reasons, though, that I did start to change my mind back then when I did like him is because during these Republican primary debates, he was so unbelievably entertaining. And just the way that he would just shit on these established Republicans who, they deserve it. You know, people like to say that Trump's a bully a lot, he punches down or whatever, but when Trump is going toe-to-toe with Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, I mean, these people are his political peers, and a lot of times throw the first jab anyways, and he's just responding. So these people, they're not these poor victims that Trump is picking on. These are exactly the type of people, these career politicians from both sides of the aisle, that you should be picking on. And I just made this montage for fun of the Republican primary debates, and this one is just of Trump kind of shushing people and putting them in their place. And it's funny to watch.
CNN just came out with a poll 2 days ago. A national poll. A national poll.
There were at least 300 Americans that applied last year. None of them were hired. Some of them have been interviewed.
It's wrong.
They were not hired. And here's why he does it this way.
I've hired tens of thousands of people over my lifetime. Tens of thousands.
Many from other countries instead of hiring Americans.
Be quiet. Let me talk. I've hired tens of thousands of people. I used the laws to my benefit because I run a company. Yeah, I never went bankrupt. Excuse me, Jeb.
Yeah.
I never went bankrupt. Never.
He talks about these great businesses that he's built. He inherited over $100 million.
Wrong.
With that money, he lost more money than
wrong.
Mr. Trump.
And Vladimir Putin, who you've expressed admiration for.
Wrong.
Well, you've expressed admiration.
Wrong.
Someone you see as a strong leader.
Wrong.
Is now dividing
Europe up. He said very good things about me, and I said that's wonderful.
I'm going to finish my statement here.
If Putin wants to go and knock the hell out of ISIS, I am all for it 100%, and I can't understand how anybody would be against it. They blew up. Hold it. They blew up. Wait a minute. They blew up a Russian airplane.
What Donald Trump did was use eminent domain to try to take the property of an elderly woman on the Strip in Atlantic City. And here's the problem with that.
Right, okay.
The problem was it was to tear down. It was to
Jeb
tear
wants
down.
to be. He wants to be a tough guy. He wants to be a tough guy tonight. Let me just. He wants to be a tough guy. A lot of times you'll have, and it doesn't work very well.
How tough is it to take property from an elderly woman?
Let me talk. Quiet.
We need toughness. Honestly, I think Jeb is a very nice person. He's a very nice person, but we need tough people. We need toughness. We need intelligence, and we need tough.
You said in September 30th that ISIS was not a
Am I
not
talking or are you talking, Jeb?
I'm talking right now. I'm talking.
You can go back. You're not talking. You interrupted me,
September 30th,
Jeb. Are you going to
you said
apologize, Jeb? No. Am I allowed to finish?
Yes, one at a time.
Excuse
Go
me.
ahead,
Am I allowed to finish?
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
So,
Little of your own
again,
medicine there.
I know you're trying to build
Bush,
up your energy,
please.
Jeb, but it's not working
One at a
very
time.
well.
Yeah.
Look.
You can be strong without being involved in every civil war around the world.
How would you respond?
Ronald Reagan was strong, but Ronald Reagan didn't.
And Ronald Reagan walked away at Reykjavik. He walked away. He quit talking when it was time to quit talking.
Can I finish with my time?
Why does she keep interrupting everybody?
Yeah.
Like I said, these people, they're whatever you want to call it, I like to say deep state, but the establishment, whatever, these people that he's insulting and going after, they deserve it. And I've made the point in a couple of videos on this channel, but it's really easy to see that now in hindsight because you had people like the first time that I could vote, it was Barack Obama versus John McCain. And then now when you have Trump come on the scene, who at the time was starting to look at it that he was, this outsider, this disruptor. In a way, you could look at it sort of like the Bernie Sanders of the Republican Party. Just the Democrats screwed over Bernie Sanders in their primary to give their nomination to Hillary, and I don't know if the Republicans didn't think that they needed to do that because they also assumed that Hillary Clinton was going to win, so they didn't need to mess with their primaries, or I don't know why it worked out the way that it did, but it really just seemed like Donald Trump was the first person that had enough money, fame, influence on his own that he was able to break through these ranks on the Republican side. So as I was saying, the first people that I could vote for was like John McCain versus Barack Obama, and then it was Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. And now when you have this person who is this disruptor who's coming to the Republican Party, those two people have shown that they are going to still side with the establishment and side with the deep state. Like in this video of John McCain doing his little thumbs down to shoot down Obamacare that we can watch real fast right now.
Mr. Portman.
But then, if you look at Mitt Romney's behavior since Trump's become president, definitely seems like the all of these establishment people are on the same team. And even people like George W. Bush makes comments and gives interviews where he says how close he is with the Clintons and how Hillary's like a sister to him.
You've often referred to Bill Clinton, and you talked about his relationship with your father and how it developed, and your mother as well, and he's your brother from another mother. What does that make Hillary Clinton to the Bush family?
My sister-in-law.
And then another example of it is Nancy Pelosi's daughter was on The View not too long ago, and she's talking about how she's really good friends with George Bush and how all of this political fighting between like Pelosi and the Bushes and the Republicans and the Democrats, it's all just political theater, and behind the scenes these people are actually all friends and get along and hang out with each other.
And then last week I went to Washington to visit my old friend George W. Bush. I made a film about George W. Bush in 2000. And I consider him, he was always a father figure to me. He's been very good to me in my life. He's one of my favorite people, right? And I may not agree with him politically, but he's always been a source of support and strength. And we were laughing about the fact that he always invites my mother to events, and one time I went to 1,000 Points of Light, a George Bush event in Texas, and one of the Bushes gets up and says, and now a great friend of the Bush family, now a great friend of the Bush family, Nancy Pelosi. And the crowd is like, wait, what? I'm confused. But you don't know about these relationships. But people, even though they disagree in public about certain things, like the Iraq War, Nancy Pelosi voted against it. They had a lot of fights about it in public. But they're still, if you saw them together last week, you would have thought it was a buddy film.
They're not like that anymore.
No, they don't seem to be able to have these conversations. I mean, I grew up with people feeling differently, and you always say, well, okay, we agree to disagree. Now, people don't have that ability, and I don't know why we can't slip back to it.
So Whoopi has the audacity to question, like, what happened to civil discourse in politics. I don't know, maybe it went away when her and her people started saying that everyone that disagreed with them was a bunch of racist, Nazis, homophobic, bigots, or whatever. And unvaccinated people shouldn't be allowed to participate in society anymore. Maybe that's when we lost that civility that she's lamenting, and maybe Whoopi needs to look in the mirror if she wants to know what happened to it. But I just also find that interesting, too, that when Trump, who again, looking at it from this perspective as him as the disruptor, the outsider that's come in, they can go balls to the walls to discredit him and his supporters and demonize them as terrible human beings. But as soon as they get the reins back and have re-solidified this establishment power back on the right, then they want to go back to having just like the civil, normal political discourse and debates, because they can control the narrative then on both sides. But now for fun, this is the second montage that I made of the primary debates that isn't so much about like the shushing and the interrupting, but like was said here in the comments, the different nicknames that Trump was coming up for people, Lion Ted, Low Energy Jeb, Little Marco. I just think a lot of these are really funny, and this video is a little bit long. It was just hard to cut out down to my favorite parts. So I'm going to show you guys the whole thing, and I hope you think it's funny.
Donald, you're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
Obviously, I'm doing pretty well. I'm number one in every polls by a lot.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't.
Thank you. And frankly, what I say, and oftentimes it's fun, it's kidding, we have a good time, what I say is what I say. And honestly, Megyn, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I've been very nice to you, although I could probably maybe not be based on the way you have treated me, but I wouldn't do that.
In Iowa now, as you know, Ted, in the last 3 polls, I'm beating you. So, you shouldn't misrepresent how well you're doing with the polls. And if, for some reason, he beats the rest of the field, if for some... See, they don't like that. They don't like that. But, no, they don't like that he beats the rest of the field because they want me. But...
The one guy that had some special interest that I know of that tried to get me to change my views on something that was generous and gave me money was Donald Trump. He wanted casino gambling in Florida.
I didn't want
Yes, you did.
Totally false.
You wanted it, and you didn't get it because I was opposed to casino gambling before, during, and after. And that's not, I'm not going to be bought by anybody.
I promise, if I wanted it, I would have gotten it.
No way, man.
Believe me.
Nope.
I know my people.
Not even possible.
I know my people.
For 40 years, you've been funding liberal Democratic politicians. And by the way,
I funded you.
The
I
reason
funded him.
You're welcome to have the check back.
I funded this guy.
Because let's
I
be
gave
clear.
him a check.
Yeah, you gave me
$5,000.
You
never funded me.
And by the way, let's be clear. Donald claims to care
why? I didn't
about
want to, but he sent me his book with his autograph.
Donald, I understand rules
Mr.
are very
Trump,
hard
you're
for you.
doing
They're
a great
very
job.
confusing.
I have his book.
Okay,
yeah, on your reality TV show, not in
Thank you.
Donald,
Thank you for the book.
Donald,
thank you for the book. Go ahead.
Donald, you can get back on your meds
There's a lot of fun
now.
up here tonight, I have to tell you.
Relax.
Go ahead. I'm relaxed. You're the basket case. Go ahead.
Donald,
Go ahead. Don't get nervous. Go ahead.
I promise you, Donald, there's nothing about you that makes anyone nervous.
You're losing
people
so
are actually
badly.
watching this at
You don't
home.
know what's happening.
Gentlemen. See, I think you're on the wrong side of this if you're still arguing for a single payer system.
I don't think you heard me. You're having a hard time tonight.
All right,
So the fact is, all I'm suggesting, we can't ship 11 million people out of this country. Children would be terrified, and it will not work.
Thank you. Mr. Trump, you've had a good... Let me just...
Built an unbelievable company worth billions and billions of dollars. I don't have to hear from this man. Believe me.
If, in fact, you went to Manhattan and said, I'm lying to the American people, then the voters have a right to know.
No, you're the liar. You're the lying guy up here. You're the one. You're the one.
Release the
You're the one. Now, let me just tell you. Let me just say,
excuse
me. I've given my answer, Lion Ted. I've given my answer.
All right, let's leave it at that.
Matter of principle, and I'll tell you.
You are the single biggest liar. You probably are worse than Jeb Bush. You are the single biggest liar. This guy will say anything. Nasty guy. Now I know why he doesn't have one endorsement from any of his colleagues.
All right, John, I get to respond.
Pick from the buffet there.
He's a nasty guy.
I'm next.
Jeb doesn't really believe I'm unhinged. He said that very simply because he has failed in this campaign. It's been a total disaster. Nobody cares. And frankly, I'm the most solid person up here. I built a tremendous company, and all I want to do is make America great again.
Terrible.
With Jeb's attitude, we will never be great again. That I can tell you. We will never be great again.
All right.
He also
Simple
said
fact
about
is,
language.
I've laid out my plans.
He said about language. 2 days ago, he said he would take his pants off and moon everybody. And I sort of have to laugh when Ted makes a big deal out of the fact that he's doing well in the polls. Well, I'm beating him in virtually every poll. I'm tied in Texas, by the way, which I shouldn't be, but I think I'll do very well. But a poll just came out, a Bloomberg poll, where I am beating him so badly that it's like embarrassing even for me to say I'm beating him that badly. And I'm a negotiator. I've done very well over the years through negotiation. It's very important that we do that. In all fairness, Marco is not a negotiator. I watched him melt down, and I'll tell you, it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. He's not going down.
He thinks the Palestinian is a real estate deal.
And these people may even be tougher than Chris Christie, okay?
The Palestinians are not a real estate deal, Donald.
Okay, no. First of all, Rand Paul shouldn't even be on this stage. He's number 11. He's got 1% in the polls, and how he got up here, there's far too many people. Anyway, as far as temperament, and we all know that, as far as temperament, I think I have a great temperament. I built a phenomenal business with incredible, iconic assets, one of the really, truly great real estate businesses. And I may be an entertainer because I've had tremendous success with #1 bestsellers all over the place, with The Apprentice and everything else I've done. But I will tell you this, what I am far and away greater than an entertainer is a businessman. And that's the kind of mindset this country needs to bring it back. Because we owe $19 trillion right now, $19 trillion, and you need this kind of thinking to bring our country back. And believe me, my temperament is very good, very calm, but we will be respected outside of this country. We are not respected now.
He was asked whether or not he would be capable, and it would be in good hands to be in charge of the nuclear weapons, and all of a sudden there's a sideways attack at me. I think really there's a sophomoric quality that is entertaining about Mr. Trump. But I am worried. I'm very concerned about having him in charge of the nuclear weapons, because I think his response, his visceral response to attack people on their appearance, short, tall, fat, ugly. My goodness, that happened in junior high. Are we not way above that? And would we not all be worried to have someone like that in charge of the nuclear arsenal?
Mr. Trump.
I never attacked him on his look, and believe me, there's plenty of subject matter right there. That I can tell you.
But Jake,
I want to.
What I've seen up here, I mean, first of all, this guy's a choke artist, and this guy's a liar. You have a combination.
This guy always goes.
You have a combination of factors. He can't do it for the obvious reason, and he can't do it because he doesn't know how to tell the truth. Other than that, I rest my case.
This is the typical.
Don't worry about it, little Marco. I will.
All right, well, let's hear Big Don. Donald.
Don't worry about it, don't worry about it, little Marco.
Gentlemen.
This little guy has lied so much about my record.
There we go. The person.
He has lied so much about my record.
While Donald Trump was building a reality TV show, my brother was building a security apparatus to keep us safe, and I'm proud of what he did. And he's had the gall to go after my
World Trade
mother.
Center came down during your brother's reign.
My
Remember
mother.
that. I don't often agree with Marco, and I don't often agree with Ted, but I can in this case. The weakest person on the stage by far on illegal immigration is Jeb Bush.
Quoting now Romney on Trump, quote, the bullying, the greed, the showing off, the misogyny, the absurd third-grade theatrics. He challenged you to answer with substance, not insults. How do you answer Mitt Romney, sir?
Well, look, he was a failed candidate. He should have beaten President Obama very easy. He failed miserably, and it was an embarrassment to everybody, including the Republican Party. He went away. It looked like he went away on a vacation the last month. So I don't take that, and I guess obviously he wants to be relevant. He wants to be back in the game.
You've done very well in this campaign so far by promising to build a wall and make another country pay for it.
Right.
Send 11 million people out of the country. Cut taxes $10 trillion without increasing the deficit.
Right.
And make Americans better off because your greatness would replace the stupidity and incompetence of others.
That's right.
You all know that the United States Secret Service uses code names for the president and his family. Ronald Reagan's code name, for example, was Rawhide, an homage to his performances in Westerns. What would you want your Secret Service code name to be?
Ever ready. It's very high energy, Donald.
Mr. Trump?
Humble.
That's a good one.
So I was very skeptical of him at first because of the connection to the Clintons and their prior friendship, and then he's sort of making a bit of a sideshow out of the Republican side of their primaries and their election. So I was like, maybe he's trying to throw it to help Hillary. I don't know. But he did start to grow on me with the way that he would talk to these people who I feel are super corrupt, have been in charge for decades, and it was actually very fun and refreshing to see somebody talk to those people like that. So when he got the nomination, I didn't think that there was a chance in hell that Hillary Clinton was going to lose, and I was pleasantly surprised when she did. So I figured I'd give him a chance. Didn't have high expectations, but I was glad it wasn't Hillary Clinton. So we'd see how it went. This was one of the things that was brought to my attention back at the time that I was actually very excited about. And everybody acts like the only reason that you could possibly like Donald Trump or vote for Donald Trump is if you're, a bigot or whatever. But this was something that I thought was a very interesting proposal on how to reorganize the government and to restructure the budget for a cost-saving move. And this speech is put on by the guy that was in charge of the budget at the time. His name's Mick Mulvaney. I don't know a lot about him personally to really have an opinion about him as a person one way or another, but regardless of the messenger, I was very interested in this budget restructuring proposal that they were promoting at the time. And I never heard a follow-up. If this did get implemented, why it didn't, what the status of any of this is. I would imagine that nothing probably has changed because the swamp got in the way, but I would be interested to know if anybody has a follow-up.
Right now, because of the Byzantine nature of the way that we regulate in this country, if you have a cheese pizza, you make a cheese pizza, that is governed by the United States Department of Agriculture. No, it's the other way around. I always get these backwards. If you make a cheese pizza, it's governed by the Food and Drug Administration. If you put a pepperoni on it, that's governed by the USDA. If you have a chicken, it's governed by the USDA. If that chicken lays an egg, it's governed by the FDA. But if you break the egg and make it into an omelet, that is now covered again by the USDA. If you have an open-faced roast beef sandwich, that's one or the other. But you put the bread on top of it, it's the other one. A hot dog, the hot dog meat is governed by one. You put it in a bun, it's governed by another. One of my favorites, if you have a saltwater fish, you have a salmon, and it's in the ocean, it's governed by the Department of Commerce. Once it swims upriver, it's governed by the Department of Interior, and to get there, it has to go up a fish ladder governed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This is stupid. Put yourself in that guy's business, and one day he's making cheese pizzas, and in the afternoon he's going to make pepperoni. He's got an entirely different federal agency to deal with, an entirely different process. It just simply doesn't make sense. So we're going to try and fix it. I want to go through a couple of examples today. I've asked the Department of Education and the Department of Labor being merged. We think that makes tremendous sense because what are they both doing? They're doing the same thing. They're trying to get people ready for the workforce. Sometimes it's education, sometimes it's vocational training, but they're all doing the same thing, so why not put them in the same place? In fact, we don't even know how many job training programs we have. Some people think there's 40, some people think there's 46, some people think there's 47. We get it down to 16, and we put it all in one place so that if you're not happy or the next president is not happy with the way it's going, you don't have, right now, 16 different people around this table have workforce training programs in their agencies. When everybody's in charge, nobody's in charge, and we're solving that by putting ed and labor together and making them responsible and them accountable. Down here, we've talked a little bit about that one food safety thing. Right now, it's at FDA, USDA, a couple of places. We move all that into the USDA. Why? Because they're really good at it. It's not to say the FDA isn't, but wouldn't it be nice to have one place where people can go to get answers, to get results, to get permits, and to deal with regulatory affairs? At the same time, in all fairness, and Secretary Perdue would tell you this, there's things that USDA doesn't do as well as other agencies. So that's why housing, and they have a big housing component. Why wouldn't that be better off at housing and urban development? So we propose to move that to HUD. Similarly, for years they've handled the food stamp, the SNAP program. That makes absolutely no sense at all. HHS is uniquely set up to handle that. So we moved that and some other means-tested welfare programs over into HHS and to have it centralized so that we can deal with it.
Slash it. Slash it.
Another aspect of Trump and the personality cult that follows is QAnon. And I've talked more in depth about how I feel about QAnon in a previous video, but I want to show this clip of Tim Dillon talking to Joe Rogan about Trump, and he sort of does a brief explanation of what QAnon is and why some of it can be a little bit ridiculous. But the funny part there at the end is he goes on to talk about Trump talking about Ghislaine Maxwell and saying, "I wish her well." And everybody or not everybody, but a lot of people wanted to take that as some sort of sign that Trump he's just a part of this whole deep state cabal. He is one of them as well. And I love Tim Dillon's response and explanation for what that comment was really all about.
QAnon thing's kind of a way they're doing it, where they're like, David Spade's got an ankle bracelet on and he's in jail and Trump's put everyone under house arrest.
Explain to people who don't know what this QAnon shit
Well, the
is.
QAnon stuff is like there is this idea that there's an intelligence dissemination operation happening, meaning behind the scenes, high-level intelligence guys or military people are leaking information about a shadow war that we don't really see happening. And the Q drops, so to speak, are like these they're like poems, or they're coded information. So it's never like, hey, this is what's happening.
Where do you get these drops?
Where do you get them? 4chan or something? You get them like on 4chan.
Okay.
And the shadow war involves Trump and the people on the side of lightness battling these deep state pedophile cannibals. Pedophilia is a big problem. They do cover up shit at high levels, 100%.
Yes.
The Epstein stuff is 100% real.
100%.
Clinton's on that plane. He's on that island.
26 times.
Yeah, the Franklin scandal. There's scandals all over the world. So I'm not delegitimizing like the idea of real human trafficking, because it has nuggets of truth.
Right.
Just like anything else, right?
Yeah.
It has nuggets of very real things. The government is shady as fuck. A lot of the elites are doing things, engaging in pedophilia, and probably worse.
Yeah.
Like some of those kids on Epstein's Island probably did disappear. But the idea that that Trump is fighting this underground war and it's all about human trafficking, I just don't think that's borne out by the facts.
Well, not only that, if Trump was doing it and not talking about it, it would be so out of character. Like, imagine this one thing that he's doing is the most noble thing that he's ever done, ever.
Right, he's
the
not
most
mentioning
selfless, the most important, the most for humanity, and he's not even bringing it up. He's just secretly winking at all the Q people.
Well, and so everything he does, there's like a reason that he does it, they say. Like when he wished Ghislaine Maxwell, he goes, "I wish her well."
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, that's a rich guy who's forgetting he's the president, who's just on a tee at Mar-a-Lago, because that's how rich people talk. I mean, that's literally, and I've been around a few like really wealthy people. This is how they talk when you say something bad, anything bad. If you go, John's wife has cancer, their kid had a DWI, he's got a problem, he had a couple incidents there at Harvard. They go like this, "I wish him well." Tee off. Like that's how they talk. That's how it's just a dismissal. Yes. It's a way to dismiss it. Yep. But the Q people are like, oh, there's a meaning. There's a hidden meaning.
Right.
He's saying that and if you look at Ivanka's wearing this dress and it means, and it's just like, listen, I'm a conspiracy guy, but this is exhausting.
I feel the same way. Obviously, if you've watched any of these videos on this channel, I'm not, don't turn away from conspiracy theories, but there are parts of the QAnon stuff that do annoy me. A big one is the way that it comes out very like coded, and those little limericks or whatever. Just if maybe that's what needs to be done to fight the battle, but I just find it to be sort of counterproductive, leaves a lot of the things then open to interpretation, and then can invite a lot of ridicule, which I also think goes on with the QAnon stuff, where they purposely inject ridiculous aspects of it into these theories. So then, just like we've talked about with some of the Bill Gates conspiracy theories that he always dismisses, so then that way he can avoid talking about the actual criticism. I think a lot of the QAnon stuff that people just hear about in passing and sound so ridiculous, they do that intentionally so people think it sounds ridiculous and they won't look into it any further. That goes into then another comment that was left here on the live chat when the debates montage was happening. Somebody brought up the Trump's quote about Hillary to, good thing you're not in charge of law enforcement in this country or the judicial system in this country or whatever. And he responded with like, yeah, because you'd be in jail. And that is one of now my beefs with Donald Trump. My opinion about him has started to shift. So, again, I was skeptical at first during the primaries. I was cautiously optimistic when he got elected, and it was a lot of fun to be a Trump supporter, and I went to one of his rallies. It was a great time. The man is a fantastic entertainer, and there was a lot of good policy, budget restructuring type things that I was excited about. But as I was watching this constant barrage of attacks on him and the character of his supporters, I was wondering why he wasn't doing more about it. And just like where he says, oh, yeah, because you would be in jail, well, then he didn't do anything about it when he was in charge. And I understand you can look at that a couple of different ways. Maybe it was just he had other priorities. Maybe which if that was his reasoning, obviously that turned out to be a huge mistake. Should have made locking her up the number one priority. But maybe he wanted to and was just taking advice from bad people who were planted in his inner circle to give him bad advice. Maybe he was constantly fighting off the Russia allegations and impeachment and all of that, and he just couldn't do it. There's a lot of different ways that you could look at it, but it wasn't just Hillary Clinton that he didn't go after there when other than just like verbal attacks in the media. He didn't do anything to rid the country of this Clinton cancer that has infested it. And I want to show this other clip from the debates because I liked it. It did make me like Trump because the question is one of those typical job interview questions. What's your greatest weakness? And Trump was the only candidate that answered it with any sort of self-awareness and what seemed like honesty. Everybody else did the thing where they took a positive and then tried to find a way to pass it off as a negative, where Trump actually had rather introspective reply to this. I'm going to play it and then talk about it.
Mr. Trump.
I think maybe my greatest weakness is that I trust people too much. I'm too trusting. And when they let me down, if they let me down, I never forgive. I find it very, very hard to forgive people that deceived me. So I don't know if you would call that a weakness, but my wife said, let up.
Dr.
So just like he said, maybe the issue is that he was too trusting and that they were able to put people who are really part of the deep state, the establishment, in his inner circle, have them pretend to be a friend and an ally. He's taking advice from them, and then they're actually behind the scenes undermining him. If that is what is going on, I would like to know who those people are. I would guess that Lindsey Graham is probably on that list of people. But that, as much as I respected Trump for being able to answer that question, what seemed pretty genuinely, it also confuses me because these people who have screwed him over, deceived him, whatever, gave him bad advice, whatever you want to call it, he hasn't really done anything to expose them. Like, who recommended that he pick any of the Supreme Court nominees or Supreme Court justices they nominated? Who gave him the advice to nominate Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch? Because all of those people ended up siding with John Roberts and the left on pretty much any important Supreme Court issue that has come down since Trump was in office. At least the ones related to the preservation of democracy and elections and things of that nature. So who gave him that advice? Because I was able to figure out that Brett Kavanaugh has a pretty interesting backstory and history with the Clintons, and I was able to figure that out. So I can't imagine that people that worked for Donald Trump weren't able to figure that out and question Brett Kavanaugh's past and what side of the aisle he's actually on. So did they just not do their research into him, or did they know about his connections to the Clintons and they just didn't care to pursue it, or what? I'm not sure. Another example is Trump fires James Comey, but then you just replace him with Christopher Wray, which is just another swamp figure. Same with William Barr. Like, who told him to hire Bill Barr as the Attorney General? Because again, just looking through his history, there is extensive evidence that he is a deep state swamp figure whose role in the political theater is to make it seem like he's pursuing justice and prosecuting people, but really he's just covering up the more serious, egregious offenses for the deep state. So all of these hiring decisions that Donald Trump made that maybe could have made a difference in the two-track justice system that we have in this country, he bid it at every opportunity. And not just with his first hire, but when that person then shows their true colors, he replaces them with somebody equally as turdy. So at what point do you start calling out these people by name? At what point do you start making the association that, oh, this person that I've trusted has given me bad advice on every single important issue? And if he is such a grudge holder, he does lash out at people when they betray him or insult him. I just don't understand why he's not doing more to the people that we watched betray him with our own eyes. And reminds me of the old George W. Bush quote.
Fool me once. Shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Just like Bush said, fool me once. I don't understand why Trump didn't apply that concept to the people that he was hiring, but it's just a little how I feel about Trump now going into his possible re-election campaign, and would I want to vote for him again? And obviously I'm not going to vote for anybody that the Democrats put up. It would have to be some honestly, I was going to say it would have to be somebody that I've never even heard of before, but I really don't think that I would trust anybody that was willing to hitch their wagon to the Democratic Party right now. Which sort of brings me back to my skepticism with Trump, is it wasn't just the Democrats that screwed him over in November of 2020. There were a lot of establishment Republicans that helped perpetuate what happened in November 2020 and then helped cover it up afterwards. And it just, I don't understand then why Trump is willing to run again as a Republican and help raise money for the Republican Party and do all of that instead of just, I'd have more respect for him if he went out and started his own, like, the, his own political party, whatever, the Patriot Party, whatever you would want to call it. But I don't understand why he is still hitching his wagon to this Republican establishment when they've shown that they are on the side of the establishment. I thought about it a lot because I could not understand just all of it with the way that the media would come at Trump so hard with the Russiagate and blowing every single tweet and everything they said out of proportion. To me, that meant that he had to be the disruptor, the outsider, because they were so scared of him. And then so I could not understand then why Trump is getting back in bed with them for round 2. But it made me realize that every single awful thing that the Biden administration has done since they've been in office, every blunder, every bad policy, everything. From even trying to implement a Department of Disinformation to trying to hire more IRS agents to snoop around in everybody's bank account when they have more than $600, to all the censorship on social media. Every totalitarian, authoritarian type thing that they have done, the justification that I have heard from people who vote Democrat on why they are okay with this is their justification is, at least we got rid of Donald Trump. At least he's not Donald Trump. He's better than Donald Trump. So as I was thinking about this more, it occurred to me that if they didn't have Donald Trump, if they had a President Hillary Clinton and people just went about not really paying attention to the politics and it was just, boring politics as usual, blah, 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 whatever, they might not be able to get away with those authoritarian policies like the IRS spying and the censorship and Department of Disinformation. Because if you had a normal business as usual circumstances in Washington, D.C., and then you tried to do something like that, they don't have that justification. They don't have that, but at least he's not Trump, reason to defend what they're doing. So in order for them to get away with what they're doing right now, they had to have somebody like Donald Trump go first. They had to have this boogeyman in place to scare and divide the country so that way they could come in 4 years later and be the protectors, and they can protect us from the threat of this terrible boogeyman, Donald Trump and all of his supporters. We can now protect you from this threat that we have identified. And if it's that level of 5D chess, I will say that's the only scenario that I've looked at it that I guess it's not the only scenario that makes sense, but I do think it's the one where most of the aspects and motivations for people and their actions line up with all the other scenarios about him being the disruptor and the Democratic Party and the establishment being scared of him. I want to believe that is true, like with I hope that that is what's going on, but there's just still some things that aren't adding up on that scenario for me right now. I hope that maybe with time more information will come out and it will prove that that was the case and was fighting the good fight for those 4 years. But part of me is pretty concerned that maybe it is a 5D chess move and I got duped along with everybody else into this backdoor Trojan horsing in this authoritarian, totalitarian state that seems we are rapidly descending into. Sincerely hope that I am wrong about that, but it does make me very hesitant to want to throw my support behind anybody that is choosing to run as a Republican, even if that person is Donald Trump. I think the lesser of two evils binary choice that they have been putting up has been a huge problem that has led us down to this position that we're in now. And maybe it might be the time to start exploring other options. So that's all the stuff that I have for this topic, or this video tonight. I think the next ones, I want to go back to a couple of the older ones that I've done on this channel that have recently come back up in the news again, and just like Tucker Carlson's January 6th tapes and the censorship and the Twitter files congressional hearing are the two that I kind of want to bring back up and revisit and add in some new information that's come out. But that's all I have for this video. I appreciate everybody watching and participating in the comments tonight, and I will see you guys next week.